Hey all. So I think it's time that we move on to a more mature debugging style. So instead of using print lines, we're going to learn to use the Python debugger real quick. It's not very hard, and it's super handy. So here we have a little bit of example code that's acting strangely. Um, don't worry about it. It's just example code. So it's not acting the way I intended to, so I want to debug it a little bit. So I'm looking here, and the first thing I need to be sure of is that I have the Python extension and the Python debugger installed. So I'm just going to go into extensions and see that under my installed ones, I have Python and Python debugger. Um, the debugger, I think, usually comes with a Python install, so you probably didn't need to install that on your own. Once you've got them installed, you can go into the Run and Debug menu here. And our first thing is going to be to add what's called a breakpoint. So to the left of the numbers here, I'm going to click and I'm going to make a little red dot there. That's a breakpoint. So anytime the code running reaches that red dot, it's going to stop and let me look at it. So I'm going to hit run and debug, and it's going to launch the little debugger console and some stuff. And then up here, I'm seeing the variables. So we've fallen into this function, and the number that we've fallen in on is 1. Cool. Makes sense to me. Looking at the globals here, I can see that I is 1 and X is 4, which is really like probably where my issue lies. But let's just play with the debugger a bit. So once I'm here, I know that N is 1. If I step over, right, that's executing the next line. If I were to hit continue, it's going to just keep running code until it gets back to this red breakpoint. So I'm going to do that once. So here we're on our second iterate through the loop, right? We've done a zero loop, or we've done a loop when I was 0. Now we've done a loop when I was 1, and we ended up in here when I was 1. Now I'm going to just continue, and we'll see if we get back in there. Oh, and we never did. So even though I have kind of, if X is in 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, we should calculate a number. We just never did. Like we calculated once and then we didn't do it again. So I'm going to hit run a debug again. Right. So that's going to run this code again. Now I got in here on the 0 loop. So I'm just going to continue. And now apparently I got in on the 3rd loop again. Okay. So that's continue, right? It's just go until we hit the breakpoint again, if it ever happens. Step over steps us forward a single line at a time. So when n is 2, I can step forward and I can see that my new variable, like the variable new, is 34 next. And then if I step forward, it should add 3 to it, be 37. And if I step forward again, it should divide by 2. And then if I step forward again, it's going to return it. And if I step forward again, it's going to print it. So you can watch both the local variables here and the global variables change. So we can keep stepping forward, and we can see that now we're on to our 4th iterate through the loop, right? At I is 3, and X was 10, so it skipped back up to the top. Now we should get I is 4. We should pick a new random X value. Apparently gave me 10 again. That wasn't in the, like, that's not one of the numbers. So we're going to move forward again. Then we're going to get a new loop value, right? So we're on our 6th time through the loop. Index is 5. We're going to get a new X value now. Okay, great. We got 8. Now we can step forward again. So you can kind of see that I'm kind of continually moving forward here. I'm going to just step this forward. We got X was 3. So now we're going to step into the calculate function, or the calculate number function. Say that X is 3 is working fine for me and I want to skip this chunk. I can use the step out button to pull me out of that function. So like I don't need to see that function execute. I'll just step out and we'll get the value we get, and then we can continue stepping forward. So you've got step in and step out. Step in brings you into a function to inspect what's happening inside of it. Step out just steps you out of the function so you can see what's going on outside. So that's our kind of basics with breakpoints. There's a couple of things we can do with our breakpoints. So if we right click on a breakpoint, we can do edit breakpoint and we can have an expression here. So like say I wanted to stop and look at the case when n was specifically 3 or something, right? I'm just going to restart our entire execution and we're only going to start when our n is 3. Oops, sorry. I didn't finish modifying my breakpoint first. So now we've hit n is 3 and we've stopped, right? If I restart that, it's possible that I'll get through this thing about half the time, right? I should get through this thing, like I said, about half the time. I just keep hitting it. I just keep hitting it. Oh my God. There we go. Okay. So about half the time. Randomness is random. Uh, it won't execute at all because it never executed on the fourth time through the loop. Right. So half the time it gets one of these numbers, 1 through 5. And in this, it apparently took me a number of tries before I didn't hit the third loop or the fourth time through the loop. What else? So you can add an expression. You can also add a hit count. Oops. So you can right click on this thing and hit edit. If you want to do a hit count, so that'll break when it hits 7 hits or 3 hits or something. You could like let's say we're only going to break when it's hit that twice. And now we can hit run and debug. And now we've gone through and we've hit it on the second we've hit it the second time, but it's actually on the third time through the loop. So you can use hit count here. That'll work too. The other thing you can do is you can just entirely remove this breakpoint. And I'm going to stop my debugger. And then down here in the breakpoints, I'm going to add, and you can add a function breakpoint. So you can just type the name of a function that gets called at some point during the program, and it'll just break anytime that function's called. It does suck a little bit that there's no autocomplete down here, but I'm just going to type calculate number very carefully. Okay, and now I'm going to hit run and debug, and now it'll break every time it hits the calculate number function. So I hit it on the 0th time through the loop, so first time through the loop, the fourth time, the fifth time, sixth time, the eighth time, yada yada. Okay, so that's essentially what we need from breakpoints. Oh, one more thing, very cool. You can in here say, okay, but what if I wanted this value to be different? Like, I don't want to hit run a bunch of times on something random and wait for it to get the random value that's causing me issues. So I could say, okay, look, uh, it happens to have issues on the 13th time. So I can just go ahead and change that value to 13, and then I can step, or to 12, really, right? Which is the 13th time through the loop. And then I can step forward each one and watch how that one specifically acts. You can do that in here as well. It doesn't have to be a value that the thing can actually reach. In fact, I just changed it to one that couldn't have been reached with the code that I have here. So you can do a little bit of manual editing. You can say, okay, so what if instead we had gotten 20 out of our random number roll? Like what would have happened then? Cool. Um, I have a tendency to default to using print statements because I am lazy and not very smart sometimes. If you catch me doing that, remind me the debugger exists. It's good for stuff. Like we should really use it a lot. It is an extremely valuable way to increase your productivity instead of using a bunch of print statements. Thanks for your time. I will catch you guys later.